Ignition sequence start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have a liftoff.
We are high tech from Switzerland.
We're Swisstech.
Swisstech.
We are Swisstech.
Swisstech.
And we are Swisstech.
And at the end, we are all Swisstech.
We have a liftoff.
Swisstech for the third consecutive year. VivaTech 2021 from the 16th to the 19th of June. Welcoming Switzerland, a land of progress, a land of innovation also. Swisstech.
Mesdames et messieurs,
ladies and gentlemen, it's with great pleasure that I'm welcoming you to the Swiss Embassy in Paris. Welcome everybody. Today's event shows the return of Switzerland to the biggest European event that is dedicated to startups and technology. I'm sure you've heard of Viva Technology. This will take place from the 16th to the 19th of June in Paris and online, and Switzerland will present innovations. Given the health conditions, the launch of this event is a hybrid launch, and I would like to say thank you, a very big thank you to all of the different internet users who've joined us online. Innovation is not a vain word, it is something that is in the minds of all the people who run companies, also those pioneers who work at the heart of innovation. In a few minutes' time, French and Swiss observations will demonstrate exactly how the birth of innovation is essential. We'll look at how innovation can be a driving force to underpin economic development both in France and in Switzerland. With this aim in mind, we're delighted to be able to welcome both French and Swiss innovation stakeholders who will speak using the languages and using the words of innovation. Research, for example, that will demonstrate to us that innovation begins with research. Next, the business perspective that will show us exactly how innovation goes on a journey once it's a question of creation, sharing and adopting value. Then the pioneering angle that will show us to what extent these different pathfinders, these avant-garde pathfinders, push innovation towards a more creative, more highly innovative industry that shows respect for the environment. Innovation is part of the DNA of our two countries, and its competitiveness is based mainly on both countries' strong capacity to innovate. Very often, university laboratories work on innovation, as do people in companies, thanks to the development of new concepts using new technologies. Switzerland is one of the countries that invest the most in R&D in relation to its GDP. Over 3% of its GDP, over 22 billion French francs. Technology transfer from universities towards companies is something that takes place very quickly and efficiently, to such an extent that Switzerland is #1 in Europe for the number of patents filed per number of inhabitants, leading to the creation of numerous startups. Today's event is also an excellent opportunity to remind those present that Switzerland and France have a very strong economic and sales partnership that is sturdy and top-notch. Exchanges between these two countries increases as time goes by, a sign that our respective markets are very buoyant. For Switzerland, France is its 5th client and its 3rd supplier. When it comes to investments, Switzerland is the 2nd investor in France with a stock of over 92 billion euros. Over 1,100 Swiss companies work in France. The context of the health crisis at the current time means that Switzerland provides a sturdy, sound framework with attractive conditions and a massive support plan for the private sector. Notably, we've set up a whole range of measures for a total amount of over 70 billion Swiss francs. And we've also launched a strong program for innovation in Switzerland through InnoSwiss, the agency for encouraging innovation that designs and aims to protect the innovation capacity of companies during the pandemic, and that aims also to guarantee their sustainable competitiveness. We're on the eve of a turnaround, and this event today is an excellent marker, a show that we're returning gradually to more normality. Thank you to all of the founders of startups of the countries that are present here from the 6th 16th to the 19th of June at the Porte de Versailles in Paris. We have a pavilion that is even bigger than the previous years, stronger presence, and thanks to this we're offering an excellent window to 12 Swiss companies active in the aerospatial sector, the clean tech sector, and that of robotics. Engines, robots, artificial arms, all of these solutions that also propose clean energy and renewable energies. Moreover, I would simply like to add that our pioneering spirit is very much at the heart of innovation, and hence we will put the spotlight on our capacity to be adventurous. On top of the discovery of the great links that we have from Saint-Exupéry to Switzerland, do take a few moments to use the solar plane by Raphael Donjon. You can discover the 1,000 efficient solutions to protect the environment, protected by Mr. Piccard, and meet the students also from the Space Center from the Federal Polytechnic School in Lausanne. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, I'm delighted this afternoon to take part in this crossed gaze from France and from Switzerland, from our embassy. And I'm convinced that this discussion, this exchange will bring forth many new dynamic processes. So I would like to declare our roundtable open on the birth of innovation. And without further ado, let me pass the floor over to Patrice, Jacquier, our moderator, who is the head of Swiss Business Hub France within the embassy. So, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you very much, Sir Ambassador, for having launched the meeting. Thank you very much. So, good afternoon, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Swiss Embassy. I can see that there are many of you joining us this afternoon. Thank you very much for having shown such an interest in the theme. In other words, the birth of innovation. My name is Patrice Jacquier. I'm the head of the Swiss Business Hub France at the Swiss Embassy in Paris. My department accompanies Swiss companies exporting to the French market, and also those projects implemented by French companies that want to develop their business in Switzerland. We work hand in hand with Switzerland Global Enterprise, that is the official Swiss organization for the promotion of exports and also investments, and we are the official representative in France. Now, I'm sure you've been able to observe that the Swisstech has taken off with 4 Swisstech companies on board, all ready and available here at the VivaTech trade fair as of tomorrow. And we will also meet and gradually encounter during the course of this roundtable a certain number of companies with their different projects. At this stage, we would like to share with you today our analysis from a Swiss and French perspective of the role that is played by the research centres, the companies, and also the human beings that take part in the life cycle for innovation, a source of new markets. Innovation is a word that we use a great deal in our day-to-day conversations, and we're going to go on a journey over the next hour and a half to look at these different innovations, and we're going to go through all of the different phases that will gradually lead to an evolution in our markets in order to serve major projects. We'll look at 3 trains of thought. They're not just trains of thought, they're ways of developing the economy for tomorrow. I'm talking about the research angle. We'll receive information on the fact that the birth of innovation begins with science and research. And in order to go into detail on this, I'm very happy to be able to welcome Mr. Bruno Sainjon, CEO of ONERA, and also Mr. Alexandre Pauchard from CSEM. Then after that, we'll move on to the second phase of this innovation, and we'll look at how innovation is continuing its journey, how it continues its journey once it's a question of sharing and communicating on the value. And we have Simone Wyss Fedele from the Switzerland Global Enterprise will talk with us with a representative, Olivier Schwartz from Soladis GmbH, and Marie-Cécile Tardieu, who will interview the company Maxon with Alain Pontille, who is present with us as well. Next, we'll have the pioneering angle, whereby we'll be able to see exactly how these pioneers drive forward with innovation and push it towards a more innovative, high-performing industry, one that respects the environment. So these 3 panels will be illustrated with a certain number of videos that will present the 12 companies present at VivaTech. We will show 4 per group, and each company will describe the themes or talk about the themes of the different panels that I've described for the next hour and a half. They will speak in English, so I do apologize ahead of schedule for not having added French subtitles for this roundtable. So without further ado, let's move forward with the research angle, the first panel, and I'd like to invite Mr. Pauchard and Mr. Sainjon to come and join me on the stage. So from the laboratory to industrialization, the birth of innovation begins with research, or maybe with science, as Mr. Sainjon said last week when we got together and had a discussion over the phone. So gentlemen, hello. Hello. Mr. Bruno Sainjon, so you are the CEO of ONERA, the National Office for Studies and Research in the aerospatial sector, and your role is to develop and guide all of the research work in the aviation sector, but not only in this aerospace sector, but not only that. Mr. Alexandre Pauchard, you are the CEO of the Swiss Centre for Electronics and Microtechnology, and you create many different startups through innovation, and your organization uses a certain number of technological competencies within the industry. Mr. Pauchard, I have a first question for you. My question concerns R&D, research and development in Switzerland. How is it organized, and how is the R&D environment in Switzerland contributing to work that can be done by companies? Well, as the ambassador said, Switzerland invests a great deal for R&D, around 21, 22 billion euros a year, and this is what positions us at the top of the podium in terms of the GDP, the amount of GDP that is dedicated to R&D. Also, I would stress that when we're talking about innovation as a driving force for R&D, mainly it is companies that fund Swiss R&D. Approximately 70%, 70, of the money invested in research and development is invested by companies, mainly, for example, the large multinational companies in the pharmaceutical sector, in the chemical sector, also in the food industry or the machine industry. These are the companies that really do push or drive forward the investments in Switzerland. Of course, you then have a whole very dense network in Switzerland of medium and small companies that account for over 99% of all of the industrial fabric and 2/3 of the jobs. And it is these companies that have a very strong ambition to export. Their vocation is very much to export and to focus on technology and innovation so that they set themselves apart from the crowd. Next, we have a very strong network of startups, over 800 that have been created over the last 20 years. And we have all of the different polytechnic schools that contribute to them. So we have this massive driving force in Switzerland, but we also have, of course, the leverage from state investments. The state investments are based on two main principles that are important to us in Switzerland. One, subsidiarity. In other words, decisions are made as close as possible to where the needs actually are. And next, competitiveness is essential. From this perspective, we have many different funds in Switzerland, for example, that enable researchers to compete with one another to obtain funding. And then at the center of all of this, we also have the CSEM and others, the Swiss Centre for Electronics and Microtechnology, that communicate in order to provide these innovations to companies. Could you speak a bit closer to the microphone, please? That would be wonderful. Thank you. So, Mr. Sainjon, over to you. Our R&D, for example, in France and the aerospace sector, what can you say? First of all, to get the ball rolling, thank you, Mr. Ambassador, and thank you to your team for having had this initiative that has given us the opportunity to have discussions. It's wonderful to be able to see each other on a presence-based mode, and it's wonderful for you to have dared, as Saint-Exupéry did in the past, and as you're doing today. It's a very interesting perspective. So if you were to remember one sentence from what I say, let me just say that you cannot declare that you're going to show innovation. For example, you can't continuously improve the candle. That doesn't enable us to create electricity. I think it's very important to make way, to create space for ideas that come from researchers. And the story I'm going to tell you to illustrate this point goes back to President Reagan and Star Wars in the United States. But history is all about starting over again. We have so many things that go on in the aerospace sector. For example, President Reagan years ago wanted to make space a military zone. And at the time, at the level of the French state, we thought, is this a good idea or not? Is it credible? Is what they're announcing feasible or not? So we asked our scientific experts, the ONERA and the Ministry of Defense, to perform an analysis at the time. And this led us to set up a specific team based on people who came from all different sectors, the laser sector, for example, atmospheric specialists, in order to check whether what Reagan was announcing was credible or not. And after having reiterated for a certain amount of time certain impressions sessions, a report was handed in saying that given the current state of affairs for science at the time, it just was not credible. All the more so in the United States, the mandate of President Reagan was coming to an end, so the initiative was going to die a death. And it's important to note that it's all about soaring the branch that you're sitting in. In other words, very few public agencies could have done the work that was being done. So moving along, we brought together at the time a group of very knowledgeable, competent people, and we asked them to work together. And then after that, we separated them and we tried to find an application. And this was the time when Europe decided to invest in what is called the major telescopes, the observational telescopes that are above our heads. And at this stage, in terms of the know-how, we invested in a discipline called adaptive optics. To give you an idea, when you look at a star, it shines. How come it shines? Well, because the atmosphere between your eye and the star is disturbed. So if we know how to correct this disturbance, all you need to do is correct the way in which you're able to observe this disturbance to see what is behind you. And so it's within the scope of this that we started to work. And just to say where we've got to today, the European telescopes are the best in the world. They are high-performing devices that perform far better than those from the United States, and the United States recognize that we're ahead of the crowd. What's interesting is that with this same know-how, we're capable of investigating other domains. In Europe, we do a lot of defense work, for example. We make a lot of investment in the initial programs that were launched for laser weapons, and we're going to use the same know-how for this. We also invest a great deal in communications in space. We know that there is a lot that can be done in this sector, and thanks to our know-how, ONERA has won a project, and the conclusions at the end of the year 2000 were that we could multiply by 1,000. That's massive, it's disruptive. The current speeds that are made possible by shining speeds. Also, we've started to look at other potential ways of using this know-how that we've developed, and there's another environment that has been discovered as obeying the rule for disturbance, but that we want to analyse. It's our eyes. So for years and years, we've been working with the medical sector at different hospitals, the hospital in Marseille, for example. We've seen over 1,000 people, because the belief is that the retina is the best indicator as to your state of health. So the more we can look at your retina, the more we can detect certain things, including neurodegenerative diseases. So this is currently what we're doing with exactly the same discipline. So one and the same discipline, several applications, a real Swiss penknife, as we say. Mr. Pauchard, so within the CSEM, how do you actually organise the full range of services that you propose to those companies that are looking to grow and that are bathed in their own R&D programme today, that are looking for support, whether it comes from prototyping or industrialisation or a small series of products? What is the range of service that you propose to these companies as the CSEM, public, private, Swiss Centre for Electronics and Microtechnical Aspects? Well, we focus on deep techniques. In other words, it takes a long time for projects to become ripe, 10 to 15 years for certain technologies. So it's important for the companies that we serve that they come forward with different bricks that are mature enough for them to be of interest. So we have two main pillars that we work upon. First of all, applied research. This, generally speaking, is funded by public money. This enables us to develop different technologies, sustainable technologies, over a period of a certain number of years. For this, we work hand in hand with academic or university partners. Then at the end of this maturing phase, as we call it, we're generally speaking in a position to propose technologies that apply 100% and can be used within a short space of time to companies in specific sectors. For example, when it comes to digital and the health sector, over 15 years we developed a specific algorithmic technique that made it possible to analyze blood pressure, and this is relevant for 1 in 4 people who suffer from high blood pressure. In other words, half of them don't know that they suffer from it. And this technology for measuring people's blood pressure, thanks to a sensor and thanks to a set of algorithms, enables us to detect high blood pressure in people that suffer from it. And next, once this technology was ripe, had been developed, we were able to transfer it in the format of a startup, one for measuring blood pressure through your mobile phone, and secondly, to measure it using a bracelet like the one that I'm wearing. And hence, every hour throughout throughout the day and throughout the night, it's possible to measure your own blood pressure, and hence you can find out whether or not you're starting to suffer from high blood pressure, and so it enables to take any actions that are required. So basically, this maturing process that requires a long period of time takes place within the CSEM, and then gradually, very quickly, it's transferred into a success factor in the companies. What about the pillar that your technologies gravitate around and your technical competencies? Can you go into detail on that? Yes, we have a very strong pillar within the scope of digital technologies. Another one when it comes to sustainable energy technologies, solar panels, for example. And then we have the traditional CSEM pillar that revolves around nanostructures and microstructures for micro manufacturing for precision-based instruments. Thank you. Mr. Sainjon, you were talking about the adaptive approach, and you talked about a great transfer between the results obtained in research, public research in the aerospace sector, and how you can gradually migrate towards the private industry and research in the private industry. You've referred to the defense sector, you've referred to the telecom sector, because there was technology developed for the telescopes. And today we're able to use these techniques and this technology, globally speaking, for people, for human beings, in order to be able to treat people's eyes, or at least in order to be able to analyze a person's state of health in relation to these mechanisms. And I think you have another example in relation to this principle, transferring technology from the public to the private sector, because we know that transferring is very important. Yes, absolutely. Let me just react to what Alexandre Pauchard said a few moments ago, because the kind of examples that we could give concerning our research work in the aerospace sector are numerous. We very often use our products for the health sector, for improving people's health, and there are far more than what people would imagine. But to revert back to what you were saying and to pure aeronautics, it really is a subject that is very topical, because if you take a look at what's been in the press this morning, Airbus helicopters, for example, they talk about their new helicopter, the H160, saying simply that they hope that they're going to be able to do a lot of very good business with this helicopter. You've got plenty of illustrations as well that show the rather unusual design of this helicopter. And what is very striking when you look at the helicopter is the blade, that is not a standard blade for a helicopter. It's got a totally different shape. People talk about a double flash and people think about a boomerang, a reference to our Australian friends. But the story behind this blade is that, initially speaking, it was all about mad scientists who started out with a blank page and who said, maybe we could imagine something that would make a helicopter a lot less noisy, hoping that we're not going to damage its performance in the process. So they came forward and proposed this idea to the state-run services, to the Ministry of the Army in France, and it's entertaining to know that industrialists came out of the woods at the same time saying, no, this will never work. However, the ministry did decide to enable them to pursue with the idea, and gradually over time we've been able to ramp up our know-how, starting, as I said, with a blank page, and we've entered into an adventure, a 100% French adventure that has become a German and French adventure over time, and now we have a patent for these kind of blades. As we've said, it takes time to develop our business for the certification of the helicopters, for example, and Airbus helicopter today says that this helicopter is now 2 times less noisy than other generations of helicopters. And either we talk about performance, and in that case they say on top of that it's as powerful as all kinds of other helicopters on the market, and on top of that they reduce the noise, and we use less fuel, and so it's more economically viable and environmentally viable. So, gentlemen, I do have a question for both of you concerning innovation. I know that you go into international cooperation, particularly between the two operations. I know that you've entered into cooperation for a long time, particularly for a project, a nano-structured project. Who would like to carry on? Well, what my colleagues did in the past is that simply ONERA has the capacity to use a lot of their machines that are used by professionals for this kind of infrastructure, and ONERA used to use specific types of paint that make it possible to reveal the behavior under pressure when we're using certain industrial processes. ONERA wanted to improve the reaction time of the paint, so got in touch with the CSEM that developed nanostructured paint with very high porous density, and this basically makes it possible to improve the exchange with air and to use a fluorescence to guarantee response time 10 microseconds, something that is extraordinary.
J'ai parlé avant de mes départements scientifiques. Il faut savoir qu'on est ensemble avec.
It's important to note that within the scope of the CSEM, we work a great deal internationally. We work with a lot of associations as well that group together many different research entities in France, in Europe, and they all work in the aeronautical or space sector. So this sector is a sector where, yes, we had a massive amount of experience when it comes to paint that is sensitive to pressure. When, for example, the pressure level is stable, we had great experience. However, we didn't have enough experience with paint that could enable us to react very, very quickly. It's very interesting. And it's a wonderful story in terms of co-development, and this type of co-development process led to us winning the Innovation Prize in 2016 from the Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Switzerland and France. And what's wonderful is each year the ONERA teams meet all of the different manufacturers who were interested in aerodynamic issues, Safran, Dassault, and so on and so forth. And the last meeting that we had took place last Tuesday. And when they started to present the latest innovations, the latest subjects, and when they started to go into the subject of our paint that is sensitive to pressure, Dassault took to the fore and spoke in the microphone and said to all of their colleagues from the sector, from the aerospace sector, this really is a form of innovation that is extremely interesting, because they were able to say that they'd used it and tested it and they've seen all of the advantages. So this is why it only took us a small amount of time to ramp up our innovation. We did the co-development together, and gradually over time we came up with a project that is already very, very satisfactory for the industrialists. So, Mr. Pauchard, yes, I just wanted to say it's extremely motivating for the teams, your teams and our teams. They love to be able to meet all of their different colleagues from sectors that they're not quite so familiar with. And my colleagues have said how delighted they were to cooperate and collaborate with you. They just learned so much. Yes, it's mutual. It's the same for both of us. Okay. Now, the last question that I have for you in relation to this is, how did you meet each other? What's the story behind the first time that you met? Oh, personally speaking, it's today. Today's the first time that we've met personally. If it's in terms of working together, well, after I came to l'ONERA in 2014, I started to work with European associations in the research sector, and so very naturally we came together and we started to put together a relationship that I think we should be able to develop further. Well, I wasn't working when all of this was launched, and so I can't say much more. But you've been there for a few months, haven't you? Yes, so basically what we can say is innovation brings you together. Yes, innovation brings us together. It's teamwork. It's not something you do on your own. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Mr. Sainjon, Mr. Pauchard, thank you to you for the innovation. And now let's talk about the takeoff phase with the first 4 Swiss companies, Swisstech companies, that are going to be present here at VivaTech and that are going to talk about the research theme.
Between fundamental research from one side and industrialization from the other side. Thanks to its unique business model in Switzerland and maybe in the world, CSEM developed world-class technologies using the public funding we received from the Swiss Confederation, about 1/3 of our turnover, and transfer it after that to the industrial sector and valorize it using kind of competitive funds and the industrial funds. And therefore, new ventures are created and new innovation are created also from companies, and the new products are launched in the market. I choose today some of the products that were launched recently. For example, the startup Ava has launched its fertility tracker, which is a product, and we have done the technology transfer with them in the frame of an InnoSwiss project. Another product that we can show also today is the blood pressure monitoring, the continuous blood pressure monitoring released recently by Actia, a spin-off of CSEM. We were able to make these success stories thanks to the ancestor of these products, which was a NISA proposal and a NISA project. In the frame of this project, CSEM has developed a system to monitor the astronauts and specifically their physiological parameters. My autonomous watch is telling me that I exceeded my time. And yes, the solar dial has been developed at CSEM.
The R&D environment in Switzerland contributed in several ways. First, there is a vibrant ecosystem for startups in Switzerland, allowing startups to get funding, coaching, and also collaboration with universities. And this really allows startups to stay on the edge of technology. Number two is really the massive technical know-how, both in robotics and computer vision and machine learning between EPFL and ETH. And finally, there is also a huge technical know-how in the Swiss technical universities as the HOS. And number three, we also have the benefit of the long-standing tradition of the Swiss label and everything that it means in terms of industrial quality and reliability. Well, our journey was pretty long. First started with just a 3D prototype. And then we were discovered by Sean O'Sullivan Ventures, who brought us to Shenzhen in China to build our first real-world prototype. And this we've done in 3 months. Before coming back to Switzerland and starting working on our safety and security prototype in what was called the garage. And from the EPFL garage, we were taken out by the Nivalis group, and really we were helped both in terms of financing and of vision, and here we are today.
The R&D environment in Switzerland was the major contribution to the success of CompPair up to now. This company is the follow-up of my PhD thesis. We've been collaborating a lot with EPFL, having a lot of support from this university as well, and we are still collaborating a lot on future projects, development of future product families, characterization of our materials, and also future implementations into real applications. The R&D phase started throughout my PhD thesis at EPFL in Lausanne, and more specifically into the laboratory for processing of advanced composites. This laboratory is really focused on processing those materials, and we've been always thinking of how to extend this processing of this great technology, and that is really part of the success of CompPair. During that phase, we had then to work with partners, industrial actors that enable us now to reach an industrial scale with several hundreds of square meters of our products that have been produced up to now.
So I think the R&D environment here in Switzerland is really fantastic. So we are an EPFL-based spin-off, but really the ecosystem just at EPFL really boosts us to transfer the technology from the lab to the market. So I think EPFL on its own is really a real environment, but more largely in Switzerland there is really lots of tools. InnoSwiss as well gave us lots of mentoring, tools to develop all the entrepreneurial side actually. And I think that on this side, it's really a fantastic place to develop R&D, and especially I would say a tech-based startup and clean tech. Yeah, actually, so we are still on this late part of the R&D side. We are still prototyping, testing, improving the markets. Going to industrialization is quite a challenge for us today. We have developed quite recently a partnership with Switzerland Innovation to help us go into this direction. there is still quite a lot of work to do, and it's quite a challenge, but we are ready to face it.
Poursuivons notre voyage avec...
Let's carry on with our journey with the second panel. We're going to look at the business angle. Value creation, sharing and adoption. After dealing with the research phase and innovation, this goes with learning, adaptation and adapting to the market. It then leads to opening new pathways for the market. On this angle, we have Swiss representatives and French representatives in charge of economic promotion, which will be the moderators for some companies that they will have supported respectively during their implementation on their territory. Let's start with Switzerland. Simone Wyss and Olivier Schwartz. Good afternoon, Simone Wyss. You are the CEO of Switzerland Global Enterprise, which is the official Swiss organization for the promotion of exports and investments. And you will be the moderator, and you will ask the questions to Olivier Schwartz, who's the managing director of Soladis Switzerland. Mr. Schwartz, you are the managing director of Soladis Switzerland, which is a company specialized in managing projects and advising projects around data. You have the floor. Many thanks, Patrice, and I'm absolutely delighted to be addressing you today and to speak with you, Olivier Schwartz, today. This is a great honor for us to have some French companies who are innovative, such as yours, in Switzerland. To start with, during this particular week, what is your main goal at VivaTech? Many thanks for welcoming us so warmly. First of all, hello everybody. So, we are present here at VivaTech in order to be able to represent Soladis, in order to accompany our partners who have some projects around data, in order to identify, source some innovation, and also to go further with some projects, whether we are talking on the Swiss side or on the French side. And also to be able to move forward with some international partners aside from these two countries by supporting our partners, our international partners on both sides of the Alps. That's perfect. So in terms of partnership is certainly a key word in innovation and also in terms of business. So I think it was in 2015 that you arrived in Switzerland with Soladis. At that particular time, what were the key criteria for your implantation in Switzerland? Well, there were many such criteria. First of all, the welcome and the capacity to interact easily in order to exchange easily and understand each other. This is a very important point on this part of exploration, where we visited several countries. We visited many cities, and we had different kinds of welcome depending on the various countries. We felt that there was a solid long-term vision that we really liked, and we really liked that as per our scientific value, which is very important to us as we are a scientific company, a science company. And from this basis, there are many other criteria that we took into account. First of all, the education network with Faraf-Scholder, North Verschaft. Of course, this is in Basel, EPFL, DERA Zurich, which are some catalysts for trainings that enable us to identify some talents and to recruit some talents, which is very important for us. The capacity also to really use other talents that can come from anywhere in the world with some international talent, which brings a lot of value in our scientific context, and also the culture of innovation. This is a very important point for us. The strength of Swiss R&D is an essential aspect for us. And of course, the business angle, the capacity to understand one another, as we have this scientific value applied to the business world, where the moment we commit to do something, we definitely do so. We move forward together. This is something that we felt very strongly with our partners on the Swiss side, and that really was what we were looking for. Super. I think that you came here very well and you succeeded greatly. We really hear that this is about partners, talents, vision, culture for collaboration, especially with innovations. It's one thing to choose to come here, but once you arrived in Switzerland, what were the leverage arms that were really important to you in order to establish yourself successfully? Well, we had some levers on the French side and on the Swiss side too, at different stages of our development, with the first part that was more related to the exploration phase. We had this reflection and this thinking stage, this scrutinizing stage through different countries, and we also had the support from COFAS, and now Business France is doing this part with their support for prospecting in terms of these exploration activities at the very first stage. And also indirectly, we received the support from Business France. I was lucky enough to be an international volunteer in a business in Basel before taking over the development activity in Basel, and this experience that we gleaned via Business France, that we acquired via Business France, was useful to us for the development of our units on site there at that exploration phase, and also, of course, the first contacts with Swiss business clubs, Swiss Global Enterprise, that gave us a number of keys for understanding some macroeconomic and social information in order to be able to move forward. And then once we started moving forward towards the other steps, when we were at the consolidation phase, we had some actors who are present much more on site, and they accompany us still today. For example, the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Franc-Swiss, based in the Basel area, which really helped us with the establishment, and they won the Catalyst for Innovation in health matters. We are partners with them, and they welcomed us over a year ago within the Novartis campus in their incubator, and also a whole raft of actors. I cannot necessarily mention all of them because there are so many of them who really helped us a lot. That's super. So when you arrive, it's important also to have a network with some official partners and maybe from the two countries who could give you some support in order to succeed. And I'm very pleased that it seems to be working well. So now regarding France and Switzerland, between the two countries, what kind of rapprochement do you see as important for companies like yourselves, innovative companies? It's a very good question. We often talk about the points of difference in order to be aware with French companies in order to really approach this zone well, but yet we have many points where we are very close, many points of rapprochement. First of all, France and Switzerland are lands of innovation, with many projects born there on one side or the other side of the Alps, but also on both sides we have some cross collaborations that are quite interesting. I would say that this is a very strong point, a very important point on both sides. Whether we're talking about innovation with public innovation or private innovation, we might have some institutes or some centers such as CSEM, which have a high excellence level in their area, and EDF also in the artificial intelligence area in the valley, which is really applied to our occupations and jobs, and of course, Lucerne and some other structures. So this innovation part is maybe the most important point. And this really brings the two countries closer with this culture, especially this same approach for scientific culture, which means that our exchanges with our partners are really fluid on both sides of the border. Well, it seems that with the companies and organizations, they speak the same language in terms of innovation, and this is really important. This matters a lot. We talked about dreams earlier, and maybe in some words, but what is your dream for Soladis in Switzerland? Well, I'm a dreamer. I'm a very positive person, so I could mention so many things to you. My dream for Soladis is that maybe it would be about developing our activities more in the aerospatial area, maybe. Establishing a link with the previous speakers simply because they saw some applications in the health area with some research that took place in the astrophysics or aerospatial area. And on our side, we are more tending towards life sciences, and I have some colleagues who are bioinformatician, bio IT specialists. They come from a statistics area because the methods are very similar between the analysis of the galaxies and the analysis of the infinitely small, which I find absolutely fascinating. So this could really be this development in this new world for us. That's great. So really joining forces between sciences and the aerospatial area. This will happen this week. Many thanks, Oliver Schwartz. And I'm giving you the floor again, once again, Patrice. Many thanks, Simone. Many thanks, Olivier Schwartz. And now let's go to Business France and to Maxon. Many thanks.
Marie-Cécile Tardieu, bonjour.
Marie-Cécile Tardieu, good afternoon. Alain Pontille, good afternoon. Marie-Cécile Tardieu, you are Associate Managing Director for Invest at Business France, and you will be the moderator and you will ask questions to Alain Pontille from the Maxon France company. Alain Pontille, you are the Managing Director of Maxon France, a Swiss subsidiary, which is a world leader in conception and development of production of motorized systems for the aerospace industry, but also for the medical area, robotics, and also autonomous vehicles. Mrs. Tardieu, you have the floor. Many thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. And first of all, I would like to thank the Swiss Embassy in France for this invitation and congratulate you for this Swiss pavilion that will launch and open at VivaTech. And before starting the dialogue, and I'm absolutely delighted to be able to have this conversation with Mr. Pontille, but I would first of all want to react to what was said in the previous roundtable. It was very interesting to listen to Mr. Olivier Schwartz, who have demonstrated that the internationalization of companies is has to be seen as a whole. We can be a French company going to Switzerland or a Swiss company going to France, and in the end, we see that there is a lot of complementarity. And with my colleague, Madame Wyss, so I want to thank you for this perspective. So, first of all, I'm delighted to be talking to Mr. Alain Pontille, and I want him to tell us a lot about innovation and his establishment in France. But first of all, to start with, maybe you can mention the integration that you have managed successfully between ABB and Maxon. Yes, of course. So the story between MDP and Maxon, MDP being the distributor of Maxon in France since 1970, with the MDP creation a few years later, this really became concrete with the integration in 2014 of our company within the Maxon Group. And this story really is due to a strong relationship between two entrepreneurial spirits and very family-orientated spirit. As you know, that the Maxon group is detained by the Brown family, which managed to develop this passion for innovation. MGP had that passion for innovation because it developed within the last few years, and especially, this is especially true since its integration within the Maxon group, this capacity to bring forward some new technological advances in the mechatronics area, which really contributed to our success with the integration of our company within the Maxon Group. You're a leader. France likes to welcome some leaders, and I have to say that we are the first European country to welcome some direct foreign investments. And what our audience is interested in maybe is, I think, is to know why you chose the Rhône-Alpes region in order, well, we chose Rhône-Alpes, first of all, because we decided to open our first research and mechatronics manufacturing center, and we have opened a new facility very recently. We did so in January 2021. This is a high technology building with 4,200 square meters, which needed a 10 million euros investment, and it would regroup around 100 collaborators who are mechatronics experts. This establishment is linked also to a decision that a strategy decision which is taken within the Maxon Group, which is to develop our activities in the next few years towards mechatronics system, which means going beyond the pure motorized system. So therefore, we have developed this activity for that future. What I find very interesting is that you found very close by. We cannot say that Rhône-Alpes is very far from Switzerland, but you found some assets that really corresponded to your needs, and you have identified in these territories some actors that could help you with your project. Yes, of course. This is a very rich area, especially with the mechatronics. Within the mechatronics area, as we found many clients, but also many suppliers who are suppliers for our company for the solutions that we develop every day. So this was the first asset, the first strength. And the second asset was the university world, which of course is present on the Rhône-Alpes, in the Rhône-Alpes area, but very close by with some very many collaborations with Swiss and Swiss Romand area, with thinking about EPFL, for example. This was a second attractive feature because, as you know, in our development, we do need to find some new talents tomorrow in order to be able to develop our activities and to continue with our innovation within our activity. Well, you have talked about talent, so once again, please allow me to put business trends forward, as Mr. Schwartz talked about international volunteership in companies, and I'm absolutely delighted to see the success of our international volunteers in companies. These are youngsters who go and work. They really work. These are not just some training courses, for example. They really go and take some high responsibilities in companies. And then we notice that these youngsters afterwards really like the international area, and they really want to push forward those small and medium businesses that they've supported in the international area. And we're really delighted to see that a lot of people are interested in this. This is successful, and many companies in France use this scheme more and more. So really, I'm counting on our audience at this webinar and elsewhere who really can benefit from this is also in order to benefit from the potential that we have on the French market. And this is my last question. What do you see for the future, and how do you see the market in France, Mr. Pontille? Well, our products are used in some strong environments where we have some really high requirements. We work in 4 markets: medical, industrial, automatisms, mobility and transport, and aerospace area. So, for example, 100 of our engines are on Mars at the moment. This is a collaboration in innovation that was carried out with NASA, and also, as I've learned today, with some Swiss institutes too. And this goes back to 1997. So, especially with the last mission, Mars 2020, which has just opened, the Perseverance rover Perseverance, is using some maxon engines, and also the first helicopter who flew on Mars, Ingenuity, is equipped with our solutions, which are very close to our standard product. So all of this shows us this innovation capacity in our group, this innovation capacity that we can also find thanks to our establishments and specialties on the French market, because within the global and maxon environment, this mechatronics specialty will really push us towards the development on the French market by being able to help some industries and some industrial groups, certainly in terms of research in the most high-tech solutions in order to help find some innovative solutions, but it will also be a way for Maxon France to develop some activities in other international countries by using the Maxon network, which has around 30 companies that distribute our products everywhere in the world. So this is a double interest, a dual interest as such. Well, we really see with the recovery plan and transformation of industries for going towards Industry 4.0, many industries could have some technologies that really make us dream with the aerospace area and conquest of and going to Mars. So we're really pleased to have Maxon in France, and we wish you every success. Well, just one thing. When we talk about links, as we have heard from the beginning, and also with Simone Wyss intervention, and also with the Swiss vision and the French vision, the links between the countries are in place, they're strong, and the forces that really support each other to support French and Swiss companies are very present and proactive, which is reassuring in that sense. I had a question that could be a trick question, but I will also ask Mr. Schwartz to answer that question. Max in France, since you've been in France, how do you feel? Do you feel that you're a French company or a Swiss company? Oh, well, we are a French company with Maxon France, that's for sure. But yet, of course, we are supported by all these proposals and innovation development that our group brings us. So therefore, that the Swiss spirit, which thanks to this family-orientated company, goes towards entrepreneurship and helps us with entrepreneurship. And that's what I've stated earlier on. Swiss is a small country, but with some entrepreneurs and some people who really push their collaborators or their subsidiaries to develop their activities with great autonomy. So the Swiss DNA for a Swiss company within a French entity legally, this from Swiss origin, and now very quickly, I'm also looking at Mr. Pontille and Olivier Schwartz and Simone Wyss, and that's saying that the opposite is also true. The French DNA is also to be found in Swiss companies now that have become Swiss because they have decided, they made the choice to be Swiss and to go to Switzerland. Many thanks for your intervention. Many thanks. So now let's lift off for the second stage with the four Swiss companies that will mention the business angle.
Our product known is connected a lot with press coverage because most people are not aware that they could even change their keyboard on the phone. And that's in a way both a challenge as well as an opportunity. The challenge is, well, people don't actively search for this product on the app stores. So we need to find other ways of making it known. And obviously through the press, this is a great way. So people read about it. I think it's also an interesting story, how the keyboard is that old, from the 19th century, and why has nobody ever thought about it, really making something different. And the other way for us is also through social media. I think there we have seen great adoption because you can make it very visual. You can show the product with videos. It doesn't take much time to explain, which is also well suited to like short videos. It's something that we're exploring right now.
The different markets, the different geographies, they are distinct in their business compositions, in their compositions of different sectors, and they are also distinct by the speed of regulation. I really remember strongly France's article on disclosing sustainability-related information, which was already some years ago in practice, while other countries followed up later on. So that gives a natural reason to not only looking at your home turf, but going where regulation, where need, where demand, and also where innovative capacity is high at the moment. Thinking about what led us having adopted our product by a lot of customers is basically always retuning and identifying the needs every day again, what customers want, educating customers in this new field of corporate sustainability in the private markets, and then really listening what customers have, where customers have pains, what customers need at the very moment. Working in sustainability means also that you're having visions that are looking very far. However, most of the customers rightfully are not at this pace. So being at the same speed as your customers helps a lot for adaptation of product.
The driving force behind our idea in promoting our product was that we are liking to go from a Swiss case out to Europe. So we wanted to develop a good idea which was working in Switzerland and applying it to the European market. And there we have a new law umbrella which is fostering renewable technologies, which is fostering more transparency in the building field. And for that reason, we believe that there is a huge market and a huge need in the international market in Europe for applying our system. The allowance to get adopted our product to everyone is that we are just interface open, so we can connect to every hardware you can imagine and then do the billing of that. We are able to connect heat, water, electricity or electromobility metering devices, and thus having a straight-on, easy and efficient and administrative billing process with our system.
Solar market will be €1 trillion in next 10 years. According to PV magazine, 10% of e-waste will be solar panels by 2050. It's a lot of e-waste. That's where the countries like France and even the global community has to focus on. We want to accelerate the adoption of clean energy in our society. Hence, we have to make sure those solar panels have to live longer. I think that's where our technology comes. We are the doctor of solar panels. We can detect, diagnose, and prescribe how to heal those solar panels and make those solar panels more greener. Companies in France looking for these kind of technologies so that the solar panels can produce more clean energy, hence creating more value for the society in terms of clean energy, but also financials. And that's where I think we are very rightly placed to provide our technology to them. We launched our company in November 2019, and soon we were hit by COVID. As a result, a lot of these solar plant owners could not send people to maintain the solar plant. And that's where our technology came. We helped them to localize the fault much before anyone could see it. As a result, a lot of solar developers around the world were looking for such kind of solution, and we were correctly placed on that. We helped these solar plant owner to digitize their assets and help them manage well.
Retour en plateau pour la...
So we're back to the stage for the last part. The end of our journey is carrying us forth to the third panel on the pioneering angle. In other words, the pathfinders of the avant-garde. These are the pioneers who are there at the start and at the end of the cycle. The innovation has been tested. They've risked their lives before and after the design phase. The pioneering spirit, as we've understood, is very much at the heart of innovation. So Bertrand Piccard and also Frankie Zapata, hello. So we're delighted to have you here with us this afternoon. First of all, Bertrand Piccard, you are a psychiatrist and also an explorer, and you joined the story by first traveling around the world in a balloon without stopping, and you then traveled around the world in a solar plane. Now, I had one first question that I wanted to put to you, Bertrand. This pioneering spirit, does it require a certain type of psychology? The answer is yes. And what's very interesting is that it requires a kind of psychology that is considered to be negative in the everyday world. A pioneer, an innovator, I believe, is a person who is not satisfied with what they've got and with what they see and with what they do. So they, generally speaking, they want something else. They want it better. They want it different. We're always told, put up with what you've got. There's a whole philosophy that underpins the idea whereby we should just contemplate on what we've got and say, what I've got is sufficient. No, the pioneer is the opposite. It's very provocative, very paradoxical, but I do apologize. If a pioneer was happy with what they got, they wouldn't explore. Very interesting as approaches go. But what you say, Bertrand, is very, very true. Now, if I refer to intuition, to imagination, to creativity, that bring about a change, a switch to a combination of ideas. How do you actually function with your pioneering mind today? I try to be as honest as I can, honest with myself, in order to be able to observe what I've learnt, what I think, what I believe, what I know, and I try and then move on and do something else. I even try sometimes to do the exact opposite, and I think about what my life could be, what the world could be, would be like if I change the angle from which I broach the world. Sometimes it's very difficult to do it yourself, so that's where it's important to have a team, to have a family, to have a whole group of people around you who stimulate you. And what I ask of the people who work with me is that every time I come forward with an idea, I want them to say, okay, this is the idea you've got, but what other idea can you have? And I systematically do it with other people. Sometimes it's a bit exhausting because you've got all those people who are very satisfied with the conclusions they've drawn, and they're not so happy with me overturning the apple cart, as we say, but they do it to me. Basically, we always have to reach out and get in touch with people who are fundamentally different, because the only thing that they're going to call into question, apart from the existential aspects, is call into question the fact that we think differently and tell us that. Thank you. Frankie Zapata, you're a professional pilot for marine motor vehicles. Let's have a look at a few pictures before we move ahead with the first question. Often I have to be scared stiff beforehand, because when I'm actually doing the thing, I see it through to the end. In other words, everybody's embarked upon the adventure with me. If I don't see it through to the end, then that's it. Sincerely speaking, I'm scared that this is going to be the time when it won't work. Frankie Zapata, you have won numerous international competitions, flyboard on water, for example, and a few moments ago, as you said last week, you said you didn't know what to do with the pipe, you removed it, and you made an air flyboard, one that is totally autonomous. Now, the first question I'd like to put to you concerns full consciousness. When we talk about full consciousness, does it have any limits? No, I don't believe it does have limits, not really. I, for example, do not put this kind of question to myself. All I want to do is to go out there to move forwards. It's not even when I move forwards, I'm not even thinking. It comes from my gut, it comes from the core. I have an idea, and at the end of the day, I don't force anything to have the idea. The idea comes automatically. I was a jet skier and I wanted to fly, and so I connected a pipe to be able to fly. Basically, my profession, my job is to solve problems in order to reach and achieve my dreams. So I wouldn't say that I ask myself any particular existential questions. Having said that, I am ready to take things a long, long way to be successful. Bertrand, do you agree? Well, we're extremely complementary, whatever you say. What I've noted is that consciousness or awareness, you can talk about full consciousness. I talk about self-consciousness in the current moment. It's essential if you want to do something that is risky. And it's something that genuinely enabled me to switch from being a kid's glad of climbing in a tree to being an acrobatic champion within the space of a few years. You have to face risk. And when you face risk, you can be totally aware, you have to be totally aware of yourself and be in full contact with your own individual resources and internal qualities, so that systematically speaking, you can meet the requirements of the level of concentration that you need. So I'd say there's almost a spiritual side, it's true, to the relation to the danger that is out there. So what is risk about for you? Certainties, limits, limitations, quick adaptation, agility, determination, pugnacity, and also the risk of failing. Well, I'd like to respond by referring back to your last question. The risk of failing, I would say, it's not a question. I do fail. I fail all the time and time again. You can't be successful unless you fail before you succeed. So I would say that's the must-have. It's the must-have for my approach. I'm an experimental developer. I also, in my first life, I was a sportsman. And obviously, you're not just world champion. You become world champion. You win, you lose as you go through the process. And I think it's self-confidence, my self-trust that enables me to face risks. But once again, this is something you acquire over time. You acquire trust in other people, you acquire trust in yourself. And I've acquired it naturally, I would say. I've had to face some very, very dangerous situations. Sometimes my life was in danger, or at least my career was in danger, or my team were in danger. But nevertheless, I know every time as the years go by, I've learned to trust myself. I know that I don't go backwards, I don't retreat. For example, I don't step aside when I've got an obstacle in front of me, whereas the majority of people would do it. Whereas if you jump over an obstacle with a bike, for example, sometimes you just keep your eyes on the horizon and you succeed. But I do know that I have this capacity to not step aside. I've learned to trust in myself. Next, it's all about instinct, and it's all about the experience that we have in life that enables us gradually to learn and to know how to cope with danger. An additional point I would make is that we know how far we're willing to go. And as I said in the short film you showed, I need to be scared beforehand. I need to call myself into question, because once I'm actually out there, I will not step back. Whatever the situation, I will go for it. So I really do have to think about everything beforehand, work out how ready and willing I am, how far I'm going to go, because once I'm out there, I see it through to the end. I go through the situation. So being scared without being scared, so that you can go as far as you know you can in terms of your capacities. Well, basically, I think human beings are wired in that way. Genetically speaking, fear is sometimes what makes us want to do something. I've learned that. I've learned that over time. I've learned that it's important to think beforehand in order to be able to stay alive. I would just say that it's important to analyze the real danger. There are lots of physiological aspects. If I ask 99% of people, for example, whether they would rather be thrown in the middle of the sea in the darkest night or send an SMS message on the motorway, they'd send the SMS message on the motorway. And yet that is the most dangerous thing you could do. You've got a strong chance of being killed. So that's what I mean by analyzing the real risk. A lot of people, they look at flyboarding and they think, God, this guy's flying. He's flying above the earth. It's a bit like a parachute. But there are years and years of experience behind this. I've learned to trust myself. I know that the machine is a redundant machine, and I trust what I do. But accidents can always happen. I take more risks than if I was sitting at a desk, but I accept that risk because it's the story of my life. Frankly, Zapata, what you were saying, Bertrand, it would seem that it's something that is not necessarily mysterious, but it's very attractive in that today, when we see somebody perform the type of exploit that you perform, when you're not a sports person, you might think this guy's mad, whereas in fact he's not mad at all. He's already analysed all the risks upstream, so he knows exactly what he's doing. Well, you know, you can talk about adventurers, explorers, pioneers, and you can talk about people who fight against death. The people who fight against death, they don't calculate anything. They're glad that they come back from death, whereas the pioneer, the adventurer, they develop this capacity. They develop specific capacities so that they're always going to be able to become better. And to develop these capacities, they know that they have to go through certain moments whereby they fail. It's no fun at all to fail. And when Frankie says he's failed time and time again, it's very unpleasant. I failed as well. But what is important is to always learn something from when you fail, simply so that you're not always retrying in the same way. It's try again, but try again differently each time. And this gives us extraordinary strength. What I'm saying is we're not here to move one step beyond our limits. We never go beyond our limits. What we're going beyond is our limitations. The limitations are what we inflict upon ourselves. And we're always way below the real limitations. This is why when Frankie and I see each other, I'm under the impression that we're just a pair of guys who are very passionate about living life to the full. And of course, we do take risks, but it's a lot more dangerous to not live life to the full, because in that case, you don't learn anything. Your life serves no purpose. purpose. A lot of people get depressed because they can't see any meaning in their life. And what's paradoxical is that those people who criticize all the pioneers that are out there and who take risks are the people who don't take any risks and who, at the end of the day, don't really live. I'd like to quote the sentence that you mentioned earlier. When I was a kid, you said, when I was a kid. Now, being a pioneer, is it a childhood dream to a certain extent? Oh, absolutely. You're spot on. It was something that was part of my education. When I saw what my father, my grandfather had done within the stratosphere of the abysses, and all the astronauts I met as a kid at the beginning of the American space program, I met them, for example, in Cap Kennedy, sorry. I saw them take off, and that is something that made me want to become an explorer and a pioneer. But at the same time, as I said, I was scared of climbing into a tree. I sort of thought, well, how can you become an explorer when you're like this? And Armstrong, who walks on the moon, he's broken all of our dreams. That's what I thought, at least at the time. So basically, what I developed was this capacity to have a kind of compass. And it doesn't show me the north, but it shows me everything that hasn't yet been done. And every time I saw something that hadn't been done, I wanted to try it. The only thing I haven't tried is drug, because I don't think there's enough benefit. But I did try. And then sometimes I try things, I don't like them, and other times I think it's absolutely fantastic. I'm going to continue, and it meant I've done 18 years of delta plane, solar planes, and so on and so forth, plus hypnosis, plus medicine, plus all of the solutions that I'm looking for with the Solar Impulse Foundation to find solutions for the planet. All of these things whereby the cursor basically tells me what direction to go in, because that's what I'm passionate about.
Frank Zapata, do you agree with this principle to say, let's go where we've never been before, and let's follow this needle that doesn't necessarily point towards the north, but it might go towards some directions we've never been to before? Do you agree with that? Well, I agree with this idea. It's good to explore new horizons. This was not necessarily my case, because my way to look at things is more to follow my intuition, and I have some impulses, I have some needs, and I just want to take them to the limit. Isn't that really what's happening with a pioneer, to have some intuitions and to want to fulfill them? Well, that's for sure. Maybe we look at things slightly differently. Maybe we start in a different way, but we get to the same endpoints. Well, that's it. Let's say that I am such a busy life that I do not have much time really to worry or ask myself much questions. But sometimes I have an idea which becomes completely evident to me, and therefore I am ready to do anything to fulfill it. So this is really something that is innate in me, and it's not necessarily about thinking about it a lot. And we asked that question many times about the fly border, and to ask what was the objective, what was the business model behind it, and I might have an answer which really sometimes might scare investors away. They say, why do you create a flying machine? Well, just to fly. I wanted to fly. Okay, that's a simple answer. I just wanted to fly. So that's the reason why these days I'm totally at peace and serene. I've done many things. I'm totally fulfilled, but yet I still want to go forward, and I still want to really push my ideas and really fulfill them. It is really something innate. And then also this transcends you. I have this background as a sports person, and even if it was an individual sport, you have this team spirit notion, and you cannot deceive people. It's not something to do with my ego. It's more to do with the health of a team, for to make people happy, and therefore, at some stage, I like these kind of moments in life, because let's not hide ourselves. There's also adrenaline playing its part, and this is a factor for me. Even if I'm not an adrenaline junkie, I love these moments. It could be that life really formatted me in this way, where you work all the time, day and night, and at one stage the team is committed, and you put your helmet on, and fate is in your hands, and the team is supporting you, pushing you forward. And at that time, unless you've lived through this, it's difficult to explain. So it's a relief, it's a joy, it's many difficult things, many things difficult to explain, but yet they really fulfill your life as an adventurer. And in the end, you become the person that you are today, because this is obvious. Whether you're pioneer or not, you have this adventurer spirit through things that surround you in your life, that help you to evolve and grow in the way that you want it to grow. And therefore, my next question is, how do you become a pioneer? But I think you've already answered that question, and that's also the case for you, Bertrand. You do not become a pioneer or an adventurer if you do not have these ideas within yourselves to push yourself forward, to overcome your limits. Limits that we believe to be physical limits, and also to go beyond certainties and beliefs. This is also essential in technology called innovation. We need to shift paradigm. We need to always look at what we think might be impossible. Why do you think it might be impossible? And then change the reason why we think it might be impossible. And then we see that we get to another level and we find different ways to do things that are really innovative and that enable us to succeed. I'll always say that it's never the candle maker who invented the bulb, simply because we need to stop just optimizing things. We need to be totally disruptive. We need to go by leaps and bounds in something completely new in order to start a new cycle and move forward. Well, Frank Zapata, when we spoke last week, I was listening intently, and you said something that really led us to think. What to you is the richest part of this adventure? Well, first of all, it's about learning. It's about having some exchanges with human beings, this collaboration. This is the true wealth, the true riches that we encounter. Well, at one point, everything we learn daily is what we carry with us, and we can then transmit this to others. So I would say that this is really the story of my life. At some stage, the goal is essential. We need to set a goal, but yet the journey to get there is as important as the result itself, because if you had to step on people to get there, or if you arrive at the top of the mountain on your own with nobody to celebrate this victory with, what's the interest? Because it becomes an adventure just to feed the ego. Well, when you talk about celebrating that success, that victory, when you've reached the summit of innovation, do you tell yourself, that's it, I've reached that level with that innovation, but is there another level when you go above the innovation? And I think that last time you talked to us about something that also goes towards the dream as a child to be a pioneer. This is this famous magical power. Well, it's true. To me, this goes beyond innovation. When you want something, it's an idea that you have to start with. And in the end, flying is something else than innovation. For somebody who had never flown before, I don't see colors clearly, unfortunately. I wanted to be a pilot. And I was told, no, you cannot do so because of your eyesight. And I thought, okay, right. So flying to me is something that I'd seen and that I'd admired all my life with insects, with birds. So to me, therefore, this was a true revelation. And it's true that when I set my foot in my boots and I look upwards, look towards the sky, and I look at birds, and then I end up flying thanks to my body. It's really some kind of power that you have created through work, and you want to transmit this and share this with people. Bertrand, is flying a magical power? Well, no, it's not a magical power as such. It's magical to fly, but it's not a power. It's not that we're more powerful than the sky. It's just that we managed to use the sky in a way. But why did we do so? Because for thousands of years, only the gods had the right to fly. And Leonardo da Vinci, when he built its templates, its plane templates in the Renaissance, would have been tortured and burned by the church if he had tried it. It was not allowed. It was deemed heretic. And then all of a sudden we see some pioneers who break the rules. And that's the role, to break the rules. And that's why in 66 years we went from the Wright brothers flight to landing on the moon. It's incredible. But yet the Egyptians could have flown 5,000 years ago from the top of their pyramids, because the first plane was made with some material and some wood. So it's not magical as such. What was magical was to be able to set aside the rules that prevented us from flying and be able to do so. However, we need to remain humble. We're not meant to fly. We're not made to fly. And each time we manage to fly, it's a conquest. Yeah, gravity always wins. That's why you need to have a little fear to start with. That's what you need to realize each time I got my machine. I know it's not a skateboard, it flies. And you need to at least keep a little bit of fear within yourself. That keeps you alive, but yet it's magical. And I think that the rules are there to be broken anyway. So this is probably the main basis for dreaming and developing what goes beyond. I have one last question. What pushes you, Bertrand and Frankie, to push your limits up to endangering your life and putting your life on the line? Well, I might sound presumptuous, but I don't think I'm endangering my life. I'm hyper prepared. Frankie was talking about jumping at night in the ocean. Well, with Andre, we were prepared to jump from solar impulse or from with our parachute and so forth. We knew how to deal with that with our equipment. If you're not trained, otherwise you die in these kind of circumstances. But if you're trained, you're conscious of it and you can survive. So I don't feel that I'm putting my life in danger. But what really pushes me is to have a life that is exciting and useful. If it's only exciting, it becomes very egoistical. And if it's just exciting, it becomes boring. I want both. Well, okay, as for myself, I take some risk, that's for sure. But yet, these are calculated risks. What pushes me to do so, first of all, is wanting to move forward. My only fear is not to have enough time in order to take all my ideas and adventures to their term. I love life fully. I have an extraordinary wife, a great child. I've kept all my friends from when I was a kid, and I come from a background and a world that is completely different from the kind of people you can find in the aviation sector or even in the business sector. I've stopped school very early. I had sports courses. So life is not about revenge for me to prove anything to anybody. Manage very early to not take into account how people perceive me. I was very lucky to be very criticized in the press when I was a sports person because it sells papers. It affects you when you're 20 years old. But afterwards, you learn to go to bed at night and to tell yourself, was I good today? If you're happy with yourself, that's really what mattered to me. And that was enough. However, I have one fear, which is not to really be able to follow my ideas to their completion, just to see how somebody like me, with my background, and where could I get to, just because I'm curious. I'm really curious as a kid. I've kept my child's soul and ideas and dreams since I was 15 years old, and I really want to know how far I can go. Sports brought me this, even if sport in itself is a quality, and there are also some bad sides. You learn, you train for hours and hours and hours to be better than others, which is a strange sort of behavior. But it's so good when you win. Of course, that's probably some traits that I still have within me, but that's great, and I want to keep this. And I want to keep my child's soul, my child's way of looking at things, and to lead my team so that we could have a different vision of the world where we live fully and have enough time to really see where my ideas will take me fully. This is my motivation. This is really what keeps me alive. And if it can inspire also, and I say this in quotes, but if it can inspire other people, this is great. Well, there are no innovations without dreams, there are no dreams without pioneers, and there are no pioneers without innovation. Bertrand, Piccard, Frankie, Zapata, many thanks. Many thanks, Patrice. Now let's look at the launch of the very last part of our Swisstech rocket with the last 4 startups who will talk about Pioneer. Let's go.
Always criticize it. I think you must be able to to understand that the people don't understand you. I think he is the pioneer, and you must have here the passionate. You must have in the heart, and you must be strong in your mindset, in your idea, and do it. And you will fold, I fold, and I fold again. And it is, in some sense, the life, but be a pioneer is a beautiful sense from my point of view. I consider me as a pioneer in my field, definitively in the humanoid robotics since now 5 years. I see the development, and we are part of the development of the future of the society. Robotic, humanoid robotic, intelligent artificial, the mapping, the facing recognition are extremely sensitive, high-tech opportunity for the future. And I see, from my point of view, as a pioneer in my field, in what we do, definitively.
Well, let's say I don't know if I'm a pioneer, but it's clear that to go for a disruptive design, something never done, it's super attractive, and it's for an engineer, it's very satisfying. And I don't see any differentiation more than the satisfaction you can get from your work. Yes, definitely, we are a pioneer in our field because we will use technologies that are not existing yet, but under development. And in parallel to our development, we will insert them, and if pertinent, obviously, they will be part of our boat. Yes, absolutely.
People thought we are crazy at the beginning. So I think what's important that you have an idea, and you have to be open-minded in terms of thinking. Do you take the risk to take it? And once you started to do it, because if you're a true pioneer or you're in the field like us, on a market which doesn't exist, so you don't have tools, you don't have the technology, and you don't necessarily have the support. So you have to act accordingly. And I think this is a pioneering, if you like. A space pharma is surely a pioneer in our domain. I mean, you have to say it like that. I mean, research in space already existed before, since 40 years. But just to give you an example, most of the research was done on the ISS, that's the International Space Station. But there per year, there were 140, 50 experiments. You have to imagine, that's nothing. If you imagine how many experiments have been done elsewhere. And under very complicated conditions, very expensive, complicated, you need astronaut, and. And so what we do is not nothing new, but we combine the matters and put them together to create something new, in fact. So making it accessible space for everybody. I think this is our pioneer step in the whole process.
Well, there are so many definitions of a pioneer. To me, a pioneer takes nothing for granted. He moves the lines. He looks for new perspective on everything. He creates great value to the society. You know, when the company was started 60 years ago, we really improved year over year the performance of our products, and we took them to the next level. Every time we are engaging with our customers, we really do pioneer work. For example, we pioneered when we helped and enabled NASA to fly to the Mars and put rovers on the surface of Mars. Another example would be we pioneer when we help our customers for medical implants with tiny motors which are life-saving and life-prolonging. But not only in applications, we pioneered as well when we started our digital journey as the first in our field over 10 years ago, when we did put all the catalog content online on the internet and enabled the customers, the end customers, to configure their drive systems and purchase this online.
Voilà, mesdames, messieurs, nous arrivons à la fin de cette table ronde.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, we're coming to the end of our roundtable. We've heard some absolutely inspiring stories on the various angles we looked at today. during this 90 minutes research, business and pioneer. And what can we conclude from this roundtable? I would say that innovation is at the source of new markets, and the role of startups is absolutely essential in the appearance of new technology. During our journey, we saw that when we looked at the research angle, that innovation by essence has an international dimension. It goes, first of all, through cooperation between France and Switzerland, in this example with high-level technology, and we saw that with ONERA and CSEM, that there are some bridges between public research and private research in the different and various industries, that innovation is transferable. It can also commute to some applications that were not thought about before. I will remind you the example of the transfer of technologies between defense to medical by going through the aerospatial area and with the adaptative view that Sainjon described to us. And also on the business angle, we learned after the conversation between Simone, Wyss, Olivier, Schwartz, and Marie-Cécile Tardieu and Alain Pontille that an innovation can become mature and then lead the way to some value creation for a company and for the market. Company is also created through and thanks to innovation. We have the example from Maxon and MDP, for example, or Soladis in Switzerland, a French company that leads to a Swiss company in Switzerland, and a Swiss company that gives birth to a French company in France. Innovation as a whole also gets companies closer. We see this today with Maxon and MDP, for example. The sharing value also leads to some technology and commercial partnerships, and it also leads to searching for talents and training. And the adoption of value also goes by the adoption of the value on the market. And Switzerland, which cultivates innovation, offers an ecosystem that is in favor of R&D, and France, which has innovation and creativity, is a lever that for the technological and commercial companies offering some high value-added niche markets. The pioneer angle shows us some emotional intelligence that can tackle anything. Being a pioneer is first of all a state of mind, and the pioneering spirit pushes innovation towards a more performance-led industry, respecting the environment, with creativity. Pioneers attract investors and lead to the creation of new activities. So thinking with an avant-garde mindset on both sides of the frontier, of the border, leads us to some new horizons in terms of innovation. At the heart of innovation, it opens doors to initiative and the creation of startups that are also led by this pioneering spirit. And finally, innovation is not a fashion statement. It has to remain ecological in order to make sense fully. But first of all, what we keep in mind is that failure is what really drives success, and that the only thing that prevents a dream from being fulfilled is the fear of failing. The dreaming pushes pioneers towards a reality that cannot fail. And if I can quote Saint-Exupéry to you in order to close this roundtable, make your life a dream and make your dream a reality. Many thanks to you all, and I give the last word to Mr. Ambassador. Many thanks. Many thanks, Patrice. This is not the last word. This is only the beginning. And we're absolutely delighted to welcome you from tomorrow onwards at our stand, Port de Versailles. As you saw this afternoon, you will discover some companies that are innovation-led. They will really surprise you in the aerospace sector, clean tech, robotics. There will be some demonstrators present, and you will also be able to go to Viva Space, which is a space roundtable led by the Swiss initiative that will tackle the aerospace topic with a pioneering angle, with the presence of Bertrand, Piccard, Raphaël Danjon, Maxwell Motors, Space Pharma, Clearspace, and the Agence Spatiale Européenne, European Space Agency. I have to thank you and to thank our speakers this afternoon, as well as our moderators. The Swiss test rocket has now been launched with the 12 companies. It will now land on the VivaTech ground, and it's waiting for you from tomorrow onwards. Goodbye.
sequence start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have a liftoff.
We are high tech from Switzerland.
We're Swisstech.
Swisstech.
We are Swisstech.
Swisstech.
And we are Swisstech.
And at the end, we are all Swisstech.
We have a liftoff.